everybody. Welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. This week, we're going to be talking about more Bigfoot stories. But this week, instead of focusing on a specific state or county or location, I'm going to focus on the year 2025. A lot of recent Bigfoot reports, and in a lot of my episodes, some of the stories go back a ways. Some go back to the 50s or the 70s, the 80s. So I haven't really been doing a lot of recent stories. There just haven't been many that I've come across. But this week, I'm doing all recent Bigfoot sightings in the United States. So we're going to do 4 or 5 reports tonight. And hope you guys enjoy these. These are recent. These are from the past few months. So really cool stories tonight. I hope you guys enjoy them. So let's get to some Bigfoot stuff. All right. So story number 1. This one comes to us from witness Amber Webster. This happened just this past June 15th in Yavapai County, Arizona. So very recent. 3 witnesses assisting search and rescue spot a Bigfoot 8.5 miles north of Sedona. So there's some very specific location details here, latitude and longitude. Nearest town is Sedona. Nearest road is 89A. And observed, she says, "Hello, my name is Amber. Me and my husband and his cousin were up in the woods about 20 miles down the dirt road looking for a missing girl." So they were with search and rescue. They're looking for a missing girl. "We were using a spotlight at night to look through the trees and brush. We saw it about 75 yards from us. He was probably about 7 foot tall, at least 400 pounds, and really wide body and shoulders. He was hairy with matted white and brown hair around his flat, hairless, leathery face. His eyes reflected a golden color. He just stared at us. After a few minutes, we got scared and left as fast as we could. Hours prior, close to the same area, when I was screaming the girl's name, I heard tree knocks. I jokingly said, 'Oh, hey, it's Bigfoot.' My husband did not believe in Bigfoot and was always skeptical about it until he actually saw one. He is a hunter and knows the wildlife in the area, I guess. He said he knows what he's seen and that it's his only explanation for what he'd seen. It did look like a Bigfoot and really scared him a lot. He does not scare easily." The next day, the hiker was found in a canyon, so that's good news. They found the missing person. We talked to her afterwards. She said she walked away from her camp and then she saw something glowing, like glowing lights or something. It moved towards her, and that's what scared her. She ran from it, and that led to her falling down the canyon. She was a ways down and lucky to be alive after that fall. Also noticed, about 2 hours before the sighting, I was screaming the name of the missing camper, and I heard from a distance 2 hard tree knocks, but jokingly I said, "Hey, there was Bigfoot." So that's interesting. I don't really like tree knocks, but they did see something later that day, so who knows? 3 witnesses, they were helping with the search and rescue. This was nighttime. She says they had a very powerful spotlight looking through the trees, and she said the environment is pine woods and hills and canyons. So let me do the follow-up investigation, and then I'll give my thoughts on this. The follow-up investigation is done by none other than Matt Moneymaker from the BFRO. And he says the 3 witnesses live in the Rimrock area. I spoke with 2 of them by phone. They heard on the news about the search for the missing camper. Her name was Janelle Banda, at the edge of the world area north of Sedona. So they went to help. Very nice of them. They were there for some time, looking around and shouting out the name of the missing woman. At one point during the daylight, they heard powerful wood knocks. After darkness, they continued to search for her. They were shining a powerful spotlight when they lit up the Bigfoot about 75 yards away. They observed it for 1 to 2 minutes. Janelle was finally found and rescued after 2.5 days, so that's scary in and of itself. The witnesses were able to speak with her and her mother briefly after the rescue. She mentioned that something scared her and caused her to panic and run away, which led to her falling off the cliff. She told them there were glowing things moving toward her in the dark. Amber got the phone number of Janelle's mother. I asked Amber to text Janelle's mother to see if I could speak with Janelle about what spooked her that night. Amber texted the mother, who eventually replied saying her daughter was still traumatized by the ordeal and by what she saw, and she didn't want to talk about it. So I don't blame her. There's a news story here, which I will link in the comments below if you guys want to see the original news story about this missing hiker. And here's a map pointing to exactly kind of where she went missing. So it's south of Flagstaff and sort of northwest of the Mogollon Rim. And we've talked about this in a previous episode, Bigfoot in Arizona. I will link to that down below as well. So yeah, there's some other pictures here, and it just kind of shows the cliff near where this girl went missing. So this one is an interesting one, and there's a couple of different points here. The first one, the first things I want to talk about are the actual Bigfoot, and they're saying it's 7 feet tall, 400 pounds, really wide body and shoulders. So again, this doesn't sound like a bear. Bear, when they stand up, are very kind of slim. There's no shoulders. It's just kind of head, body, and then it down to the two stubby feet. And I'm throwing up a picture here so you guys can see what I'm talking about. You're not really getting the broad shoulders sort of vibe from a bear standing up. She also mentions the brown hair and a hairless, leathery face. So we see that a lot. Flat, hairless, leathery face. So we see that a lot with the kind of the flat nose. A bear is going to have a long snout, and it's not leathery. It's hairy usually. So they're seeing the face. The eyes reflected a golden color. So we hear that a lot too. The golden, the amber, orange. People have differing sort of interpretations of what they're seeing, perceptions. Some will say gold, some will say amber, some will say orange, but it's all kind of in that, golden, orangey category. The other interesting thing here, so that to me sounds like a classic Bigfoot. There's nothing really questionable there. The interesting thing to me is this hiker who says she walked away from her camp when she saw something like glowing lights. And we're hearing this more and more in the Bigfoot community. And my buddy Scott and I, we talk about this a lot, the orbs and the lights, and a lot of people want to link this to UFOs or some sort of paranormal activity. And I really don't think that's what's going on here. The woods have very natural things going on in them, St. Elmo's fire and spook lights and things like that aren't necessarily paranormal, but they can look a little freaky. And I don't want to ignore this because a lot of people do see weird lights in the woods. And maybe there's a natural explanation for it. Maybe there isn't. I just don't like when people automatically jump to, oh, a light in the woods is a UFO, or a light in the woods is a ghost, or an interdimensional being, or it's even connected to the Bigfoot. This hiker is not saying she saw Bigfoot. She's just saying she saw lights. So we don't really know what her mental condition was before she saw these lights. Was she hallucinating? Were these just St. Elmo's fire? Were these just naturally occurring lights in the woods? Were these the flashlights of some other hikers? Who knows? I do know people, and I myself have seen weird orbs of light at night, not connected to Bigfoot, just here in the neighborhood of the city, and out in Jersey, and people have seen these orbs of light. I don't know if it's connected to Bigfoot at all. If this hiker said she had seen Bigfoot, then maybe. It is interesting. You can make this connection here because the hiker is seeing lights, and these search and rescue people are seeing reflective eyes. So maybe that's all they're seeing. Maybe these lights are just eye shine. Who knows? But an interesting encounter here that they saw this thing. I mean, 75 yards is not terribly close. You got to think of a whole football field, and that is 100 yards. So 75 yards is 3/4 of that. So you're not right on top of this thing. But at the same time, I think people are going to recognize bear versus, monkey, ape man sort of thing. So interesting encounter. And this is just from this past June. Okay, so this next encounter happened on July 4th. So very, very recently. And this one was submitted by witness Eric Butcher. And I like when people give their names. I mean, I totally get when people want to stay anonymous and they want to protect their identities, but I really appreciate when people will give their real names. So this one is Ohio howls heard by campers in Kern Canyon, 15 miles north of Isabella Lake. So this is from California, Tulare County. And I don't typically like howls and vocalizations. Again, just we don't know where they're coming from. If you don't see what's actually making them, we don't know. And I'm going to get a little into that further into this story. But I do like the Ohio howls, and I'll get into that again at the end. So let's just read Eric's story here. Again, this was on July 4th. He gives, latitude and longitude. Nearest town is River Kern, Kernville, California. Nearest road, Mountain 99. Observed, he says, my wife and I were camping in the Sequoia National Forest at Fairview Campground next to the Kern River for the 4th of July weekend. It was just her and I and our 2 dogs. We'd wanted to get away from the noise of the fireworks in the city, Bakersfield, for the dog's sake. I don't blame them. The fireworks were crazy this year. With it being a busy holiday weekend, the campground was at full occupancy, but was fairly quiet except for some laughter in some of the campsites around. We were just sitting outside the RV with our dogs. We were talking. In the distance, we started hearing long, moaning howls echoing down the valley, seemingly from the mountainous ridges surrounding us. There would be a long howl, then silence for a few minutes. My wife heard the sounds first. She thought it was a train. So that's interesting. You're just kind of hearing this long, she thinks it's a train. I pointed out that there were no trains anywhere near where we were. We heard these vocalizations at least 5 times, if not more. I began teasing her that it was Bigfoot. In the back of my mind, I knew it sounded exactly what I had heard in recorded vocalizations that were in media and online. She thought that stuff was crazy, so I passed it off as a joke. On Sunday, we were packed up and heading home. We stopped at the general store, McNally's, next door to the campground to pick up a cold soda. I was wearing one of my t-shirts depicting a gray alien and Bigfoot sitting around a campfire. Sounds like a cool shirt. The shopkeeper struck up a conversation with me saying that he liked my shirt. After a few minutes of small talk, he shared that several campers from the campground next door had come in with stories of hearing a Bigfoot the other night. I had not told my story at the time, so that's interesting. He said that he hadn't heard it because he said, when the sun goes down, I go down. I told my wife what had been told to me upon returning to the RV. She is by nature very skeptical, but exclaimed, I can't believe I heard a Bigfoot. Once we returned home to civilization, I did some research online. I was listening to some recorded vocalizations, and in the middle of one of them, my wife exclaimed, oh my God, that's exactly what we heard. I don't know exactly what it was. It was the Ohio howl, but I feel it definitely warrants further investigation in the area. I am aware there is a history of sightings and vocalizations around here. Also noticed, I was joking with my wife about it being Bigfoot, teasing her a little, but after speaking with the general store shopkeeper on my way home on Sunday, and after listening to some vocalizations recorded on the BFRO site, and thinking about it all weekend, I'm convinced this is what we heard. He says it was shortly after dark, approximately 10:30 p.m. There was a 3/4 waxing moon bright in the sky. It was a clear night, no cloud cover. So interesting. And I'm going to play the Ohio howls in a moment. But they are kind of freaky. And I like the Ohio howls because to me, they're kind of like the audio version of the Patterson-Gimlin footage. Like you hear them and you sort of think to yourself, okay, this is really a Bigfoot or this is a hoax. I don't think it's any other animal making these sounds. They sound freaky. They sound powerful. It's not coyotes. It's not anything that I've ever heard or most people have ever heard. So I think there's very little room here for interpretation. Either it's an unknown primate, or it's a hoax. It's something, manipulated audio. So let me play those for you guys now so you can hear them, and then we'll get to the follow-up investigation. Okay, so the follow-up investigation is done by, again, Matt Moneymaker, and he says, here is the Ohio howl recording, and he says this is a big male Sasquatch. Now, how does he know that? This is part of the Bigfoot community that I really don't like, that this sort of speaking with authority, speaking in facts instead of saying, I believe this is a big male Sasquatch. To say this is a big male Sasquatch, how do you know? We don't. There's no way of knowing this. Maybe it's a big female. So to assume that it's a male, that bothers me. I hate speaking in absolutes. And when people do that and say, oh no, this is definitely this and that's definitely that, we don't know. So that bothers me. So there's really not much else here. He's got a map of where it happened. So down here in Southern California, looks like it's south of Fresno. So yeah, and each map here just zooms in even more. So I will link to all these so you guys can check these out for yourselves and just look at the photos in more detail. But interesting that when people hear these things and then go back and listen online, and we hear this a lot, people say, I went back and I listened to all sorts of recordings of things in that area that could have been there and I didn't recognize any of them, or I found something on the BFRO website or on another Bigfoot site that it sounded like. Maybe it was samurai chatter, maybe it was the Ohio howls. So that to me is always interesting, and it's interesting that other people heard it too. The guy in the campground store, so, or other campers. That was pretty cool. So let us move on. Okay, so this next story submitted by witness Madeline Kuntz on Tuesday, June 24th. This actually happened on June 23rd in Lawrence County, South Dakota. Close range sighting of a Sasquatch by a motorist near Sturgis. So again, she has GPS coordinates here. And it says the witness returned to the location the next day to get the coordinates and to photograph the location. So there's some photos below. Nearest town is Sturgis, Boulder Canyon. Nearest road is Boulder Canyon Highway. And she says, I was driving from Deadwood to Rapid City at around 10 p.m. through the switchbacks leading into Sturgis. There were not any other cars on the road, and I had my brights on so I could see any wildlife well in advance. So a lot of people will do, you don't want to crash into a deer or anything. About 2.5 miles west of Aurora Place turnoff, a large animal was on 2 feet, easily clearing the top of my vehicle, so greater than 5.5 feet. I saw it out of my passenger side window. It came up out of nowhere. On this road, there are guardrails which any wildlife would have to hop over to get onto the road. It entered the roadway right as I was passing, very dark brown, more red in undertone than gray, so it could not be mistaken as a large elk or deer. It was basically pitch black behind the vehicle, so I did not see which way it went. I was too scared to stop or turn around. Also notice no other observations out of the ordinary, no other witnesses. She said she was on the phone with her fiance while driving and told him immediately of what she saw, but she was driving alone. Other stories, she says not aware of any, but always joke how squatchy the area seems, especially in the evening. So it sounds like a creepy area. This was about 9:45 p.m. And there's a follow-up investigation here by BFRO investigator Ontario Richardson, who says, I spoke with the witness by phone. I found her to be very credible and her story to be credible. So on Monday, June 23rd, she was driving to her home in Rapid City from Deadwood. She had dinner with her parents at Mustang Sally's restaurant in Deadwood. She left around 9:35 p.m. to drive home. She was driving along the Boulder Canyon Highway, traveling around 35 miles an hour to avoid hitting the wildlife on the highway switchbacks. So the switchbacks are just kind of, you just like a winding road where you're kind of switching back and forth. And so, yeah, good to go slow. You don't want to hit anything that might jump out. So it says, as she drove, she saw a large, long-haired Sasquatch step over the railing onto the highway about 2 feet from her car. She was able to see the shoulders, chest, and legs. The fur was brown with reddish undertones. We hear this a lot too. When people are driving, a lot of times they're not seeing the waist down, or they're seeing only the waist down. If you're driving, your eyes are on the road. So a lot of times people just see the legs, the 2 bipedal legs walking by. Other times, if they're very close to it, they're just seeing the top portion of it. It's running in front of their car, and they're just kind of seeing the top portion because they're trying not to hit this thing. She pivoted her head quickly and saw the legs again behind her before it was out of view in the darkness. She estimated it to be around 7 to 7.5 feet tall. She said her stomach sunk when it set in what she saw. Immediately afterwards, she called her fiance and said that she almost hit an animal, but that it wasn't an animal, and asked him to contact her dad. Her father believed her. She commented that the creature picked the perfect time to step up and over the railing, as it was the second her direct headlights passed it. It avoided being illuminated in full brightness. Again, so why not wait another 2 seconds? Wait 2, 3, 4 more seconds and the car's gone. She never would have seen it. So again, with these road crossings, why do these things time it the way they do? Just very strange to me. The animal would have had to walk up a very steep slope to get over the railing. On the other side of the road, there is an even steeper slope up to the pine forest. So right there, I think we can eliminate a hoax. Again, somebody, in a Bigfoot suit or costume at night going uphill is going to be very cumbersome. She said the only thing she could compare the creature's size to is a very large upright grizzly. She also commented that her father is 6'4", 250 pounds, and 2.5 foot across at the shoulders. She said that what she saw probably had another 6 inches of width on either side. So, another foot wide. Interesting. Possibly related, around this time of year, South Dakota Game, Fish, and Parks releases mountain goats ahead of the Sturgis motorcycle rally to support a growing population and give tourists a chance at seeing the mountain goat. In 1924, non-native mountain goats were introduced to this area after a small herd escaped Custer State Park. South Dakota Game, Fish, and Parks now releases additional mountain goats to enhance the population. It may be coincidental that this sighting occurred near where those goats are released. So maybe this Bigfoot was chasing something. They could be a tamer, more easily caught population compared to local mountain goats, so a little bit more domesticated. The same phenomenon is seen with trout in West Virginia. I think it's very possible that the local Sasquatch could be predating on these goats along with the native elk and deer. So really interesting that it might have just been chasing one of these goats. And myself and other people have postulated that too, that these road crossings, why do they time it so that they're seen? They could wait 3 or 4 seconds, the car would pass, and then they could cross behind the car and nobody would ever see them. But they frequently risk being seen or even hit by jumping out in front of these cars. So maybe it's just, there's my meal. And if I wait 3 or 4 seconds, it's gone and I need to eat. So it's very possible that it's just chasing a meal. And, maybe she didn't see the goat, or maybe the goat was just kind of hanging out on the other side. And the Bigfoot's like, I have to go now and get this thing. Car be damned. So let me know what you guys think about these road crossings and why these things jump out just in enough time to be seen. If they waited a few more seconds, they'd never be seen. Really strange. All right, so we got 2 more stories coming up. This one was submitted by witness Edward Henry on Sunday, May 18th, and this happened on May 18th in Monroe County, Michigan. Location details: I-75 to Laplaisance Road exit behind the jail near the quarry in the back. The investigator notes the 2 witnesses entered and exited this area from where Winchester Street terminates at the railroad bed, west side of the railroad, north of Plum Creek. GPS coordinates here are not precise. The GPS point is in the marsh near the railroad tracks, but is otherwise off the mark where the incident occurred. So if anybody is local or wants to go check this out, again, all of these reports will be linked down below. You can check out the exact coordinates and try to find out where this is. I've done this a few times with BFRO reports, gone to the actual location, and it can be very eye-opening. I'll just say that. So observed, and Edward says, I was bow fishing today with my son around 11:30 a.m. We walked down the creek, Plum Creek, past 4 bridges, they're railroad bridges, and headed into the marsh. 100 yards into the marsh, the dog scared up something that was bedded there. Trees were shaking. We thought it was a group of deer. We continued on 200 more yards to the creek basin in the marsh. We sat and enjoyed the wildlife for a little while. We headed back through cattails and saw a lot of deer beds on the way to the first bridge. We crossed the first bridge and was between that and the second bridge. We heard sirens in the distance. My son said, "Do you hear those?" I sat down my bow and arrow to get out my cell phone and earbuds. I wanted to listen to the police scanner app on my phone to see what was happening. My son was behind me and the dog was off to the right. All of a sudden, I heard rustling in a tree to the left and a huge thud hitting the ground from the tree. A big, heavy animal hit the ground and crouched and started moving towards me through the brush. My dog fired off from the right of me toward the creature. The dog almost got to it, but the creature shot off extremely fast through the trees and brush. The dog chased the creature up the slope and over the train tracks. I then called for my dog to come back. My son said, "Holy shit, what was that?" It was as big as a bear, but it looked like a gorilla. We walked back, but we heard something crunching on the ground behind us. We left. Other stories, he says he found a bunch of numerous newspaper articles from 1963. So interesting. And this was at 11:30 in the morning. So another follow-up investigation from Matt Moneymaker here. We'll go over this and then I'll give my thoughts. So Matt says, I spoke with Edward and his 12-year-old son by phone separately. Both are credible and freshly descriptive about what happened to them this morning. So they call this in like the same day. Really cool. Edward is 47. He was born and raised in the area. He earns a good living working in the demolition trade. I asked many questions about what they saw and what the animal did. I asked enough to discern that it was not a bear. It was a large, dark-furred primate that ran up a slope on 2 legs looking like a gorilla from behind. Yes, that would be Bigfoot. I guess so. The animal was roughly 10 feet up in the tree when it jumped down. At no time was it facing the 2 humans. The point at which they got the clearest look at it was when it was ascending the embankment. They could see the hairy back and the big butt cheeks pretty clearly for a few seconds. The animal was not on all fours. It raced up the slope on two legs, but hunched forward. In its hunched posture, it was nearly 6 feet tall. The son said it would have been much taller if not hunched over. The incident happened so fast that there was no time to even consider trying to photograph it. And that's a question that comes up a lot. Why didn't you take a picture? Trauma will set in, and you're just so stunned by what you're seeing, you're not thinking about grabbing your phone. The whole encounter lasted less than 10 seconds from beginning to end. It happened totally by surprise. No one would have gotten a photo of it in that first shock interval. So yeah, very interesting. So they're not getting a great look at this thing, but they're getting enough of a look to tell that it was up in the tree. They hear a thud. They hear it jump out of the tree. So it may have been up there looking at them or watching them. Maybe it just felt like this was a good time to run. I don't know. But they're saying it clearly ran up a hill on two legs. It's not a bear. The dog was chasing it. They're saying it looked like a gorilla. It had butt cheeks. It's hunched over as it's running uphill, but that's any primate would do that. If a person is running uphill, they're going to kind of lean into it, center of gravity. So all these details are really interesting. The follow-up investigation doesn't give too much more detail. Again, they're not seeing the face. They're seeing this thing totally from behind, but not a bear and not a person. I don't think a person would be able to outrun a dog running uphill. That's just not, especially in a Bigfoot suit or a gorilla suit, that's just not going to happen. So this one, again, I wish there was more detail. I wish they had seen more, but we can't pick and choose what happens when people see Bigfoot. So another really cool, interesting Bigfoot sighting. All right, so our last sighting for this episode comes to us from Kansas. I've never talked about Kansas, and I think a lot of people, if you're thinking about Bigfoot, Kansas might be one of the last states in the continental U.S. that people associate with Bigfoot. But here we have something from Jackson County, Kansas. This happened a few months back. This is March 24th, so we're getting more into the spring. All the other ones were kind of May, June, July. So this goes back into March, and two witnesses in a razor see a Bigfoot at dusk 12 miles north of Topeka. And again, there's GPS coordinates here if anybody's local and wants to go check it out. Nearest town is Hoyt. Nearest road, Northwest 94th Street. And again, Warren Fink, you have a name here. People are becoming a little bit more bold and brave about coming forward, and not to take away from anybody who wants to remain anonymous. I understand there are many reasons why someone would want to remain anonymous, and that has nothing to do with bravery. It's just about protecting your job and your livelihood and your family. But I always think it's great when someone gives their name. So let's talk about what he observed. So he says at roughly 8 p.m., a friend and I were driving home from a friend's house on his razor on 94th Street, west of Highway 75, heading east. My friend pointed to the south and said, "Hey, Warren, is that a Sasquatch?" I looked to the south and said, "Yeah, right. It's one of those metal Bigfoot signs on the hill." As we were proceeding east, I noticed the arm movement and thought maybe it was mechanical. So again, this guy's trying to debunk it. I appreciate that. He's saying, "No, it's one of those signs." Like Scott has one of those on his his shed there, and there's pictures of us standing next to it. Very cool. And you see these all over New York State and other places too. So really interesting. But now he's saying, oh, maybe it was mechanical. Maybe somebody had motorized it. He continues, we stopped when we reached the fence line, and I saw it was an actual Bigfoot. It was very tall, maybe 7.5 to 8.5 feet, coned head, covered in black hair and long swinging arms. It continued over the hill and turned in mid-walk and looked back at us. So that sounds very much like the Patterson-Gimlin footage. This thing is walking, and then it turns and looks back at Patterson and Gimlin and then keeps walking. As it proceeded over the hill, I hollered at it to try to make it stop, but it just kept walking at the same pace. Interesting. My friend and I looked at each other and said, "What the hell did we just see?" Of course, he said no one would believe us. We turned around to try to see it at the next crossroad, was at the next crossroad, stopped at 2.5 miles to the south, and shut off the razor. I did 2 calls and no response. We continued to the next road, heading south, and turned east. Went to the same fence line and stopped, but saw nothing. Once again, turned around and went to 94th. No further sightings. So didn't see anything after this initial sighting. He's saying the moon phase was waning about 29%. Temperature was roughly upper 50s to lower 60s. Time was about 8 p.m. Dusk. Weather was partly cloudy and calm. After all this, we did see 4 deer in the same section, which were heading its way. So again, maybe it's chasing a food source. After the sighting, we saw more deer on the way home and one standing in my friend's driveway. Theory is he was out hunting deer because they were so active. Do not remember any smells, as we heard they stink. Headed back out this morning to look for tracks and hair, and they only found one hair on the fence, and it looks like deer hair. So I like that they tried to debunk this at first, that they're trying to look for a rational explanation. They went back to look for things. They're not embellishing the story by saying it stank or they noticed the smell. So who knows? But I think a good sighting, they're thinking first it's just somebody with a Bigfoot cutout because they're all over the place. And I remember there was one time there was this guy, they were doing a repair in my house. They were fixing the hot water heater. And I had a Bigfoot cup, mug on the counter. And he was like, he's like, I see Bigfoot all the time. I go snowmobiling upstate. And we're like, what? And he's like, yeah, that's the cutouts. He's like, there was one time they were snowmobiling at night and, they're going fast and they're going through the woods and they came out onto someone's property. And he said the headlights just illuminated a Bigfoot cutout. And he said for like the first couple of seconds, his heart just stopped because he thought it was an actual Bigfoot because you're just out there. It's the middle of the night and it's dark and your headlights illuminate this thing. And he said, after a few seconds, he realized it was the cutout. But at first he thought he was seeing something. So they are out there. Follow-up investigation by BFRO investigator Susie Myers. And there's a picture here of her holding up a stick. Let's see what she says. On March 28th, 2025, I met the reporting witness, Warren Fink, near where the sighting occurred on the 24th of March. He gave an account of the sighting, as in his observation above. He lives about 3.5 miles from the sighting location in a rural area outside of Hoyt, Kansas. The road they were driving on at about 20 to 25 miles per hour was hard-packed dirt with some areas of deep ruts. West of the sighting area, the road has several small hills. Between the road and the east-west fence was a moderate amount of grass and young trees with scant leaves before the landowner burned the roadside. Warren indicated the Polaris Razor's location when they initially sighted the Bigfoot from a high point. The Bigfoot was walking moderately on the east side of a north-south barbed wire fence headed south. After plotting these two locations, the unobstructed sight line from the witnesses to the Bigfoot was approximately 170 meters. They then proceeded on the Razor to about 10 feet east of the fence line and were approximately 60 yards from the animal. So again, a little more than half of like a football field. Warren called the Bigfoot and it turned towards him. When he recreated the Bigfoot's turn, he rotated to the right at the waist with its shoulders and only turned his head slightly. So again, like the Patterson-Gimlin footage, if these creatures have their shoulders up here, they can't really turn their head too far without running into the shoulder. So they turn the whole upper body. Interesting. The Bigfoot then turned away and continued walking at the same pace toward a grove of trees where they then lost sight of it, approximately 360 meters away. A landfill is approximately 2 miles directly south of 94th Street. So just like the Patterson film, it sees them and it doesn't really change its pace. It's walking, it looks at them and it keeps walking. It just doesn't run, just very, very fluid and consistent. And we do hear about these things near landfills a lot and dumpsters. So make of that what you will. She continues, using a tape measure, Warren determined the Bigfoot's height to be around 7 feet 6 inches, consistent with his 7 to 8 foot estimate. He based his initial estimation on comparing the Bigfoot to the adjacent fence posts, which are 4 feet tall. He estimates the encounter after moving the Razor to be at least 20 seconds. No long hair was noticed hanging from the animal's arms as they remained at its side. Interesting. They returned the next day to check for footprints and found one area of depressed grass immediately north of the road and on the downside of the fence. Coming from the north, there appears to be a game trail leading from a grove of cottonwood trees surrounding and abutting 2 ponds. So you have water, you have, maybe this thing was coming from there. Warren said he hadn't seen any disturbance in the grass south of the road before the brush burn occurred. There was no examination of the Bigfoot's path beyond the fence as permission was not granted. So it's private property. They couldn't do much more of an investigation. She continues, he has not heard of anything unusual happening in the region, such as calls or wood knocks. He is not aware of any of his friends or neighbors having injury or death to livestock. He is also unaware of friends or neighbors losing any stored feed. No hunting seasons were open, negating the possibility of misidentification with a hunter. So it's not a guy in a ghillie suit out hunting. There's no large game in the area, with rare black bear sightings only occurring in the state's southern counties. That I understand, and people comment on my videos a lot, saying, "No, there's no bears in this county, and there's no bears in that county, or they stick to this side of the river." I get that, but there's always a possibility that a bear wanders and goes somewhere it's not really supposed to be. We see this: bears are in neighborhoods, bears are in people's backyards. They're not supposed to be there. They're not usually seen there, but they sometimes wander, and we have to take that into account. So, and again, I don't think this was a bear. What they're seeing was clearly upright. It was clearly very tall. A black bear standing up, probably around 6 foot tall, maybe a little taller, but it'd have to be a really big bear. And black bear typically don't get that big. Again, not impossible, but from what they're describing, I don't think this is a black bear walking on two legs for as long as it did. So just wanted to point that out. So anybody saying, "Oh, it couldn't have possibly been a black bear," they don't know county lines. They're going to wander sometimes, and they will sometimes be where they're not usually seen. The grass depression was nondescript upon observation. So yeah, it's a depression in the grass rather. It could have been anything. So her final impressions: Warren is an intelligent and articulate man whose account of the sighting has been consistent. He was pleasant and open to the inquiries from the BFRO. He is a hunter and facile with estimating distances. He has returned to the site and the area a few times since the sighting and is now curious about Bigfoot activity in the area. So that's usually what happens. People are not usually into these things, and then they have a sighting, and then they get very into these things. So, and again, with other reports, there's maps here and some photos of the area where they saw it. And this is kind of what you'd expect Kansas to look like. It's wide open, flat land. So interesting to see a Bigfoot there, and harder to mistake it. If you see something walking in the woods, the trees are obscuring it, the branches are obscuring it, there's a higher probability of misidentification. Here, you got something 8 foot tall walking in this empty field. You're seeing what you're seeing. So there's pictures of the fences here. And again, I will go up to the original photo of her holding the stick up. So I'm guessing this is, the top of the creature. So very tall. These fence posts look taller than 4 feet tall, though, unless she is very short. So who knows? But another really interesting encounter with they're seeing something. And again, there's not a lot of wiggle room here. I don't think this could have been a bear. I don't think this was a person in a suit. So either they saw Bigfoot or they're lying. And I don't think they're lying, because these are people who met with a researcher. They're cooperating. I don't get where the hoax would be. Where's the punchline? There isn't one. So could they have been mistaken? Anything is possible, but I don't think they were. This is a hunter. This is somebody who recognizes these things. I think we'd all know if we saw something we couldn't explain. So make of that what you will. All right, everybody. So there are some Bigfoot sightings and stories from 2025. These are recent. Like I said, a lot of times when I do these episodes, the stories can be very dated, and sometimes they're just from the 90s or the early 2000s, but sometimes I go back to the 70s, the 60s, the 50s, or even further back. So it's nice to have really recent sightings. And a lot of those older sightings happen because now a lot of those areas are developed, and you're not going to have Bigfoot sightings there because it's a housing development and it's not the woods that it was 30, 40 years ago. But here we have sightings from just weeks ago. So hot off the presses, cool sightings. I like all of these. The Ohio howls, I'm always a little iffy on howls, but I think if you're hearing those Ohio howls and you're saying that's what we heard, then you're hearing something really freaky. So until next time, everybody, question everything. Did these people really see Bigfoot? I tend to believe they saw something. These are really good sightings for the most part. They're getting detail. They're seeing actual creatures. It's not just a tree knock. It's not just something walking around their tent. They're putting eyes on these things and they can describe them. So really cool. So question everything, everybody. and embrace the weird. I do. Fun stuff out there if you just know where to look for it. So hope you guys enjoyed these recent Bigfoot sightings. And until next time, everybody, rock and roll.